Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron, New Life Pentecostal Church, Albany, Georgia. I've been going through a little series by this book by Dr. Bill Cooper, New Testament Fragments Amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. Many videos, conclusive that they're there. The rebuttals, like by Olland and others, are people who have not actually handled the manuscripts, like O'Callaghan did, and he was the leading papyrologist of the day, started the journal to papyrology. And so here we are. And you can watch many videos on this. Don't answer it by this video. There's many videos we've done on this. On a Romans commentary amongst the Dead Sea Scroll fragments. So this is absolutely fantastic. So let's take a look. I'll show you the cover of this book too, in case you want to buy it. I'd recommend it to everybody. Even if you hate, even if you're one of these, James White, Dan Wallace guys that just are so limited in their scope of New Testament manuscripts, just, trying to, Greek only and not examining the host of other evidences that are out there. It's kind of pitiful, as a matter of fact. But I tell you, man, trying to deal with a Dan Wallaceite or a James Whiteite is tough, because they just get, and they are brilliant in Greek. Don't get me wrong on that. They are geniuses, and I appreciate what Dan Wallace is doing, gathering together the Greek manuscripts. But there are so many holes in their conclusions. That's the point I'm making. Okay, so a commentary on Romans, which I've got a video to be made on that, if it ever gets made, because I've only got a few thousand videos to do, and who knows. So, 7Q19 is one of the most historically intriguing documents we could come across. It's not a fragment of any New Testament book. I'm just going to read some of this, skip around a little bit. But it does appear to be related to the New Testament in so much as it seems to be a commentary on one of its books, and it contains several pointers as to which book we should be looking at. But 7Q19 is quite unlike the cave's other fragments in another highly unusual way. In fact, in the world of papyrology, it is unique. Okay, I've got this underlined. Cave 7 at Qumran was excavated between the 16th and 19th of February 1955. Concerning the state several fragments were found in which features of the cave they were found in. The report mentions some ancient and broken steps inside the cave. Now, that's important, because what's happened, somebody went and blew up Cave 7. To my knowledge, nobody knows how. I mean, it wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't a roof collapse. They blew the thing up. They scrubbed it. It doesn't exist anymore. And we could guess why this happened. Okay, most of the written fragments were picked up on these steps. One of the texts, N19, was written on papyrus and is preserved only in its imprint on a block of mud. A flake coated with mud likewise bears the imprint of papyrus fibers and the stamp of the two Greek letters. This is the imprint. In other words, nothing was left of the papyrus of which the text of 7Q19 had been written. Only its ink remained, imprinted most clearly on what was been a lump of mud. Now, you might say, well, how, if you've ever been to Qumran, I've been once. I mean, it's one of the driest places on earth. How was there moisture in there? Well, it's a long story, but historically, it's because when they broke the Roman soldiers broke the papyrus vases, one of the soldiers urinated in there, and that inadvertently preserved this thing. All right. So the forensic analysis of Cave 7 fragments conducted by the Israel National Police Laboratory in Jerusalem mentions the clear evidence of violence that the fragments had suffered. 7Q5 particularly showed signs of this, exhibiting both a hole and a tear of its fabric. The jar in which the scrolls had been stored had been smashed to pieces and scattered all over the cave floor. Okay, so skipping over several things, the person who did all this, most probably a soldier of the 10th Legion, which was in AD 68, hunting down any Jewish rebels that they could find at Qumran as well as anywhere else in Judea. We know from finds in other caves in Qumran that the Romans had broken into some of the caves hoping to find fugitives in there, and finding none, vandalized their contents. Here it seems one of them, whilst vandalizing the contents of Cave 7, had shown his contempt for these Jewish books by urinating on one of them. All right. Okay, so what we appear to be looking at in 7Q19, the largest fragment of text found in Cave 7, by the way, is a commentary on Paul's letter of the Romans. How can we possibly know from such a small fragment? Here, so 7Q19 bears 34 letters and 6 lines of text. They do not match any New Testament text or any extant biblical Greek text, but are as follows. Now, one of the amazing things that we've got now is you can actually punch in a computer database, and every Greek literature, like from 480 previous, is in there, and then 480 on is in there. And so you can begin to search the stichometry, as it's called, for the different possibilities. Now, again, the Israelis themselves have come to the conclusion these were New Testament fragments. All right, and so this is what happened with this particularly large fragment, which was ink only because of the aforementioned events. All right. Seed provides a 4-page technical appraisal of the text, but the basic facts are these. In lines 4 and 5 of the fragment, we have words that refer to the creation in direct reference to the scriptures, and it gives the Greek with all of them, which together combine to tell us both the nature of the text and even which book of the New Testament is being referred to here. It was enough to frighten the editors of the Editio Precepts, Ballot and colleagues, for they tried to throw a most non-committal pall over the subject. But the evidence is clear and powerful, not least for the fact that outside Paul's letter to the Romans, the words are unique. The text as we have it in 7Q19 cannot be traced in the Greek Bible, nor in any other apocryphal text, nor in Greek literature as a whole. Now here's where it gets interesting. I'm still reading this, page 62 of this book. Thiede points out that it was the invariable habit of Jewish Greek writers and commentators on the Greek version of the Old Testament to always place the epithet holy before the word scriptures. Even Josephus, writing long after, conforms to this habit. Yet for some reason unknown to us, our New Testament writers did not conform to this habit. Oh, maybe it's because there was no real Septuagint. Instead, they simply refer to the scriptures. The only exception is the one occasion when Paul, writing in Romans 1:2, speaks of the Holy Scriptures, but then he places the epithet for holy behind the word for scriptures. So this is fascinating. We do know that the omission of the conventional holy marks this out as a document pertaining to the New Testament by a writer who conformed to the newly adopted New Testament convention of always omitting holiness epithet. And I think that's the Greek word. All right. Is it eros? Yeah, eros is what it looks like in Greek. Moreover, whether he copied Paul by adding agio, like hagio for holy, afterward or not, does not spoil the identification. 7Q19 is a document that pertains to and concerns the New Testament. I was reading that because he doesn't have transliteration. He's only got the original Greek in here, so I'm having to, and I haven't studied Greek in many years. All right. Is a document that pertains to and concerns the New Testament. But how do we know that it concerns in particular Paul's letter to the Romans? Because in Romans 8:19, Paul speaks to creation in the same genitive clause as we find in 7Q19. That's fantastic. Let me say, now for years I studied Latin, Hebrew, Greek, Spanish. I was trying to learn theological German, all this. Well, then when I finally got the understanding that the King James translators, and I really dearly loved Greek and Hebrew, by the way, Greek especially, knew Greek far better than I ever could. I just deferred to them. And once you have about 200 supposed errors shown to you that are then proven not to be truthful, you begin to shift your allegiance and say, well, maybe these guys are right. And then you find out they really are. Okay, now the ramifications of this are immense, truly immense. We know from the presence of fragment 7Q9 in Cave 7 that Paul's letter to the Romans, which was some 10 years old by AD 68, was known and used by whoever placed the New Testament scrolls in the cave. By the presence and nature of 7Q19 in that cave, we know that Paul's Romans was not only read, but studied and studied in depth. And this confirms, obviously, you mentioned 2 Peter 3:16, as also in all Paul's epistles, speaking in them of these things, which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest as they do the other scriptures under their own destruction. Okay. Interestingly, just 3 verses before, Peter had been talking of the new creation before referring to Paul and urging believers to read Paul's letters, some of which he had to confess contained things which were hard to understand. Notice also how Peter allows the New Testament convention of follows the New Testament convention of omitting the epithet holy before scriptures and even after. Earlier in the 3rd chapter, in the 4th verse to be precise, Peter even uses the same word for the old creation in its genitive case as both Paul in 7Q19. So let's go back here. This is very much enforced when we consider, okay, well, let me start. Page 63, last paragraph. Now, it's the fragments of Cave 7, 7Q4.1 to 7Q19, had been exclusively of books of the New Testament, then they could be called a collection. But the presence of this commentary turns that collection into a library, a reference library no less, in which books are not just read but studied as well. It's very much enforced when we consider the multiple copies of Mark's Gospel, at least 4 copies of which were found together, written by 4 different scribes in 3 different styles of calligraphy. And if you've watched the other videos, you know that they were coming from a scribal scriptorium of Heraclium near Rome that was churning out New Testament documents as inspired to be put all around the empire. Okay, we've done videos on that. Okay. That speaks powerfully of a production center, professional scriptorian no less, meaning at the very least that some scholars have a great rewriting to do, especially those who have us believe the gospel, especially born of oral tradition, on and so forth. Okay, so the theory, this is Thede in his Bericht über die Kriminologische Untersuchung des Fragments 7K5 in Jerusalem, Christen und Christlich 239-245, which my German probably is terrible. The theory put forth for Cave 4 that the Romans in AD 68 or shortly thereafter discovered and smashed the jar and ripped up the scrolls inside, explaining the 800 small fragments in the cave applies to Cave 7 as well. The solitary jar that was found smashed along with a few scraps of papyrus show that 7Q5 at least, and perhaps 2 or 3 of 7Q4 with their traces of wanton destruction fit into this scenario. All right, so in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you not only have a lot of New Testament fragments, which we've been going through, but we also have a commentary to Romans. So God's good. And, you know, I just want to say, so much of your scholarship, whereas like guys like Geisler and even White and Wallace do certain things and present certain things, they are not the end-all of end-all to scholarship. And so many things are found outside of the beaten path of what's known as established scholarship. And usually in a couple generations, it'll either be lost or it'll be mainstream. So just love the truth. Buy the truth and sell it not. God bless. Talk with you later in Jesus' name.